captioning.
And thank you. Turn on the closed captioning. Disable the waiting room.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We're gonna get going here. Just a minute while people get settled.
So we do have interpretation available this evening. So everyone down on your control bar should have an interpretation or translation button there. So if you can set it to the appropriate language, either English or Spanish as appropriate, just if you leave it on off, sometimes it creates some audio issues where you may not be able to hear everything. So please set it to either English or Spanish.
And as a reminder for GPAC members, many of you have done this, but if you could please put GPAC in front of your name so the public knows who the GPAC members are, that would be great. And Kristen, if you can help with that, we'd appreciate it.
All of them should have that already. We pre-registered them with that title.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, I think we can get started.
Hey. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 14th, 15th GPAC meeting that we've had. I lose track after 12. We're glad you're all here this evening. Tonight is a combined GPAC meeting and community workshop. And as you all know, this is an extremely important meeting where we are reviewing the preferred alternative and taking comments on it. I would like to start the meeting and just to reiterate an announcement that there is interpretation into Spanish. If you are wanting to have interpretation, please go to the interpretation button at the bottom of the screen and click Spanish, and everyone else should go to the bottom and click English if you want to hear in English. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we can jump into the meeting this evening. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
That is a yes. Great. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you for the feedback. Tonight, so we're going to start just with some basic Zoom features this evening. So if we could ask everyone to keep themselves muted during the meeting, that would be much appreciated so that we don't get feedback from folks. If you are a GPAC member, we would encourage you to leave your video on for the majority of the meeting. If you can't, that's okay too. And it is optional for the public about whether you want to have your video on or not. For GPAC members during our discussion, if you would like, and for the community during just some of the community discussion portion, if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please use the raise hand feature. I want to quickly go over our agenda this evening. We are here because we are going to review the preferred alternative and provide some updates on the survey results that we heard last time. But most importantly, what we are going to do this evening is to have a discussion with both the GPAC and the community. So everyone is going to be involved at some point tonight on the preferred land use alternative. And what we really would like to do is to make sure that everyone has a voice in the process and that everyone's questions are answered and that that we're getting really good feedback on the preferred alternative. So we're going to start tonight with an overview of the preferred alternative, of the preferred land use alternative. And then we're going to move into breakout groups. We're going to have one breakout group for the GPAC, and then we're going to have breakout groups for the public so that you all have an opportunity to provide comments. I will repeat this later, but I will say it now that if you are a member of the public, not a member of the GPAC, and you want to listen to the GPAC conversation as opposed to participating in a breakout group, that is fine as well. We can make sure that you are listening to the GPAC discussion. After the breakout groups, we're going to have highlights from what the small groups talked about, and then we're going to try and get direction. We're going to seek direction from the GPAC on how we move forward with the preferred alternative in terms of individual recommendations on the preferred alternative. And then we'll talk about closing and next steps. Again, our objectives are to make sure that everyone understands the process of developing the preferred alternative, to provide an explanation of the preferred alternative, and then to get feedback. So the opportunities for providing feedback on the preferred alternative are as follows. Tonight, what we'd like you to do is to listen to what we are presenting this evening in terms of what is in the preferred alternative, and then to ask questions, and then in the breakout group to provide comments. After, we want you to review the preferred land use map and the memo, and then to complete the online survey. As a reminder for where we are in the update process, we are at the stage of policy development and plan alternatives, and we are moving to the council providing direction on a preferred alternative next month in May. And from there, we're going to move into plan development and then review and adoption. A point to note here, as this shows, we still have a lot to do in our work on the project. We've been focusing a lot on land use, but there's lots of other topics that we're going to need to be dealing with and addressing in the general plan. And so we're going to continue to do work and have meetings on those topics throughout the next 4 to 6 months. I'm going to start with a review of the process of how we got to the preferred land use alternative. I would assume at this point that most folks have been involved and know what is going on. So I'm going to try and keep this relatively short, and we can answer any questions during our small group discussion as needed. We've been working on the project, the city team, working with the community for over 1.5 years now. And we have done an extensive engagement process that is outlined here in the general flow of work. For each of the engagement activities and the engagement work that we did, there was a product that has led us to where we are today. So we started the process with asking the question of what are the strengths, values, issues, and challenges in the community. And that led us to the guiding principles, which the General Plan Advisory Committee weighed in on multiple times. We then asked the question, both in the GPAC meeting as well as through an online survey, about where change should happen in the city. So assuming that cities grow and evolve over time, and so we need to find out where are the areas where that evolution should happen. And this led to a map that we call the Areas of Change map. Once we had that Areas of Change map, we then asked the question of what areas should be preserved, which is essentially the flip side of what are the areas of change. And that led to the map, which is the Areas of Stability. And as expected, the majority of the city was defined as an area of stability, or an area with very limited change. After that, we asked the question of what could be built in the areas of change. And we, again, did this through an online survey, and we got some pretty specific feedback about the locations and the types of development that the community wanted to see. The areas of change map is reflected here. And this is the map that we've generally been working with to just allow us to dive deeper and to ask the question, which is how could these areas evolve over time, and even should they evolve over time? So the areas that we identified, there's essentially four main areas of change: Rancho Conejo, Moore Park Road, and West Thousand Oaks Boulevard, downtown and Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and then West Lake and East End. In addition, ideas came up in the process about what do we do with the retail areas throughout the city, and that's what you see numbered 1 through 7. And these we were calling village centers. So when we did the math with this, essentially over 90% of the city was defined as an area of stability, and then 7.9%, just under 8%, was defined as an area where there could be potential change. It's important to note here that a lot of these areas of change are actually not going to have any land use change at all. And in fact, they were just larger geographic areas that we could look at to provide context for where potential change could occur. Based on the guiding principles and based on the concepts and ideas that both the GPAC and the public identified to us throughout the process, we created 3 different alternatives. And those alternatives varied in terms of the location of mixed-use development and multifamily development, the locations where employment could be located, and it looked at different patterns to figure out ways that we could implement the vision and the guiding principles that were developed throughout the process. As we said when we worked on this and we presented this previously, we never expected that any one of these alternatives would become the preferred alternative. And in fact, what we said was that we were going to present these as concepts and then take pieces that the community liked from each of them to present that and to provide that preferred direction for the general plan. And that is in fact what happened. All of the land use alternatives had commonalities. So there was a series of sort of givens that we had for the land use alternatives. And the first is that there was no decrease or increase in residential capacity. Without going into too much detail, Measure E limits us to not increasing the total residential capacity in the city. And state law, SB 330, limits us to not decrease the overall capacity of the city. So essentially our target is a number of about 81,000 housing units. Not that any of us expect that we are ever going to achieve that in Thousand Oaks, but that's the number that we have to have, a number that has been around since 1970 when the general plan was first developed. The second is that all of the alternatives try to match the land use designations in the existing neighborhoods to the existing development that's on the ground now. And then the third is that some of that unbuilt capacity from the residential areas would move over to the areas of change. Again, a lot of this is happening. A lot of this mathematics is happening because of this tension between Measure E and SB 330, where we can't increase or decrease the residential capacity. So if we're going to allow for some multifamily and mixed-use development where it isn't allowed right now, we have to move that from somewhere. And so we identified some potential locations where that could come from. And one of those areas is that there is a land use designation in the general plan now that actually mostly has single-family homes, but allows up to townhomes in that area and multifamily housing. And we felt that that was a good opportunity to be able to move some of that unbuilt capacity into the areas of change to achieve other objectives that the city has. There are differences with the alternatives that we presented, and that is the location and intensity of mixed use, industrial and commercial uses, and then the location and mix of standalone residential and standalone uses. So we tried to vary the amount and the type of development in order to test different ideas to see how the community reacted, to see what people liked and what people didn't like about those. And so the alternatives were essentially a way of testing different ideas that we had, that we heard throughout the process, to see how the broad concepts and ideas that were presented, such as provide a diversity of housing types, which is something that came up a lot. We tried to test how that could happen in the alternatives and then get feedback on that throughout the process. The draft alternative, the land use alternatives were released in February 2nd, and that was where that was 2 meetings ago for the GPAC, and it was also a joint GPAC meeting and community workshop. In the time between February 2nd and March 15th, we had that workshop on February 2nd, and over 250 people attended. We then had 4 land use alternative office hours that were open for everyone to come and ask questions. And I see a lot of familiar faces this evening who attended at least one of those land use alternative office hours. In this time period, we had about 25 neighborhood and stakeholder meetings where we met with various groups of folks. So the city staff and my team with Ramey and Associates, we met with a large number of members of the community to explore ideas, hear concerns, and explain how we got to where we are. There were newspaper articles in the TO Acorn and the VC Star. There was a Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram campaign. In this time, there were 8 email campaigns. We distributed 2,500 hard copy flyers and 200 surveys, primarily in Spanish to the Spanish-speaking community to try and increase participation from that community. And then we did a number of email blasts out to our database in order to generate as much interest as we could. Overall, the survey had over 2,100 responses, 2,127. The majority of those were completed in English, but there were some completed in Spanish only. The survey was open from February 2nd to March 15th. And as you know, we extended the deadline in order to increase participation in the survey. There were 33 questions in the survey. 6 were open-ended questions where we just asked people's opinions and just asked people to write their comments of what they thought. There were 16 questions that were essentially multiple choice, but with some space for comments. And then there were 5 demographic questions at the end of the survey. It's important to note that we compiled the results for all of the surveys, but not all of the respondents answered every question. So some of the questions people skipped because they didn't want to answer them. And that's very common in opt-in survey such as this. It's also important to note that this is not a statistically valid survey. This was an opt-in survey because we wanted to give every member in the community an opportunity to participate in the survey. The survey demographics showed a wide diversity of city residents who participated. 97% of the respondents either live or both live and work in the city. More than 75% have been in the city for 11 years or more. So that means that a lot of folks are longtime residents and certainly very established in the community. 61% were 45 years and older. 78% identified as white, not Hispanic or Latino, and this is slightly above the city average. And that all of the zip codes in the city were well represented, but 91320, the Newbury Park zip code, had the highest share of respondents. All of the details of the survey were presented, the survey results were presented at the last meeting in March. To dive a little deeper on some of the survey demographics, we look at the demographics to understand how well the community is represented by the survey that was done. So on the left, you see the age comparison. You see the ages of the survey respondents, the age brackets. And on the right are the citywide age ranges based on US Census data. And as you can see in the survey, the under 18 is very much underrepresented in the survey, less than 1% in the actual survey, but 25% in terms of the residents of the city. This is not a surprising result. Most people who are in high school and younger don't take surveys or participate in the process. But when you look through the other categories, particularly in the 25 to 34 and higher, what you see is essentially a pretty close parallel for an opt-in survey. Again, it's not statistically valid, between who took the survey and the citywide age ranges. There were questions at the Planning Commission meeting about whether the survey was rigged and whether people could take the survey lots and lots and lots of times and how that might impact the results. Because of that, our team spent quite a bit of time going through the survey responses. And this gets a little bit technical, but when every person took the survey, their IP address, Internet Protocol address, is registered in SurveyMonkey, which is the survey tool that we use, the online survey tool that we use. And if you took it from on your device, you could only take it once on your device. So you can't just someone couldn't go on and just take it multiple times. And we did that because we wanted to limit the number of people, because we didn't want people to take it multiple times. However, multiple people could actually take the survey on different devices from the same IP address. So we had to look and track different IP addresses to see if there was anything going on in the survey that might have led to people that could have pointed to someone kind of gaming the system. And what we found is that out of the 21-27 surveys, 413 of those were associated with more than one IP address. So of that 413, 304 of those responses were associated with where there were 2 responses associated with an IP address. 24, there were 72 responses or 24 IP addresses that, each IP address had 3, and then 3 IP addresses that had 4 responses, and then 3 IP addresses that had a total of 25 responses. 1 IP address had 6, 1 had 7, and 1 had 12. And so it's very easy if you have a couple in a house and they each have their own device, they would actually show up with the same IP address. So if there were 2 people with 2 devices in a house and they took the survey, we think that could relate to why there are 152 IP addresses with 2 responses each. So what we did, just to make sure that the survey was accurate, is that we did a comparison. And we just released the survey report with this, where we're showing the details of this comparison. But we analyzed all of the results of the survey with both the full data set of the 21-27 surveys, and then we did a sensitivity analysis where we took out everything that had more than one IP address, and that was 1,714 surveys. And what we found is that the majority of the results, in fact, all the results, were really in a 1% to 2% difference between the 2 data sets. What this tells us is that the survey, the responses were valid, that we have a lot of confidence in the results of the survey, and this was really important because we used the survey results to really guide the direction that we were proposing in the preferred alternative. So we spent significant time going through the data and identifying and trying to find out whether there were any issues, and we don't believe that there are any issues with this. And a memo from city staff described this process. In addition, to the multiple choice, there were 6,000 individual comments that people wrote in the survey where there were open-ended questions. This is a huge amount of comments. They were written in one of 2 types of questions. One was when there was a category and an option called none of the above to a multiple choice question. So as you remember from the survey, we asked people, for example, which alternative they preferred, 1, 2, or 3. And then we gave the option of, and if you clicked none of the above, you could write a response about why you selected none of the above. If you didn't select none of the above, you couldn't write a response. And what we found is that less than 19% of respondents selected none of the above, and most of the times it was 15% or less. So this means that the majority of people supported the direction, one of the options that was presented. But where there were comments in there, so in the 15 to 19% or less than 15 to 19%, about 75% of those comments that were in there were expressing some form of opposition to what was presented in the alternatives. But again, this is a really small percentage of the total. So the majority of people selected one of the alternatives. Overwhelming number of people selected one of the alternatives. There were also open-ended questions where we just said, what are your additional thoughts on this area? And these were more balanced between positive and negative responses. And most of the respondents skipped the open-ended questions. So about 15 to 25% of people answered these open-ended questions. The only exception to this was question 9 in the survey, which was about Rancho Conejo, and 65% of survey respondents left a comment in this area. And the full report of all of the comments, plus our detailed analysis of the individual comments, is available on the project website. Okay, so let's move into the preferred alternative. Again, the reason I went into that is because the preferred alternative is based a lot on the survey that was done. And there were questions raised by some members of the community about whether this survey should even be used at all. And again, in our opinion, we did the data analysis, and we believe for an opt-in survey, it is a good source of data. It's also important to note that ultimately it is up to the Planning Commission and the City Council to make the decision that they feel comfortable with, whether that is in line with the survey or not. It really is up to the Planning Commission and Council how they want to move forward. What our job was for this process was to be true to the engagement process, to accurately reflect what we're hearing from the community in all forms of engagement, and then present that information to the decision makers in order to make a decision. So let's move into the preferred alternative. The process that we did for the preferred alternative. So the first is, as I mentioned, the preferred alternative incorporates the components of all of the alternatives. So no one alternative is really the majority alternative. There was a preference in the survey for alternative 1. I'm not going to go into detail on what that was, but essentially that wasn't necessarily the way that we move forward, because we used the survey questions to hone in more on what people wanted in specific sub areas within the areas of change. And so we use those survey results to help us guide what the preferred alternative is. However, there was other feedback that was used, feedback from the open-ended comments, feedback from the comments on the briefing book. And these were also incorporated into the preferred direction that is you'll see in the alternative. One thing to note was there were some reactions from the community and concern, and this was expressed at the last GPAC meeting, about the total amount of development that is being shifted from the residential areas into these areas of change, and then also the maximum density that was proposed in the alternatives as an option, again, to test ideas. And so the preferred alternative does actually reduce the total amount of development that is transferred over. So there's less development capacity than in the preferred alternative than was shown in the areas of change. And there is also the maximum amount of development on any parcel is lower than what was shown in the alternatives. So this, we know, was some of the concern from the community. And so we responded to this in the preferred alternative. The proposed land use designations are shown here and on the next slide. And I just want to point out a couple of things. In the preferred alternative, the designations haven't changed, so that the density and intensity and the height is the same as what we presented previously. We are doing two things. One is we have removed the neighborhood high and the mixed use high, which allowed 5-story buildings and up to 60 dwelling units per acre. So this was removed. They were in the alternatives, but they are removed from the preferred alternative. And then the other is that because we removed this and because we got some additional comments, we are still working through the specifics of the types of uses that are allowed in each of the alternatives. But the land use designations provide the general direction and the general vision for each of these areas, and that's really what we're looking at now. So these are this slide shows the range of residential designations, as well as the two mixed use categories. One thing to note is that the neighborhood medium and the neighborhood low designation each one has two essentially sub designations. And we can get into that a little bit later, but essentially all that we're trying to do is to line up the existing intensity of what's built on the ground to what's allowed, so what's allowed to be built today. And one of those reasons was to achieve additional objectives that the city had about, and that the public had about, allowing mixed use development in new areas. Again, all of this is done because Measure E caps the amount of development, the total development capacity in the city. So these are the commercial designations. There are still 3 commercial designations varying in intensity and 2 industrial designations. And then of course we have institutional and then parks, golf courses and open space, which account for over 45% of the total land area in the city. This map shows the preferred land use alternative. The white areas that you see here on the screen are county islands, so there are no designations in those areas. And the red line represents the sphere of influence, and the dotted black line represents the city limits. The preferred alternative is based on the guiding principles that were developed in the process. And the guiding principles, and throughout the process, there was very much a strong desire to preserve parks and open space and to preserve and maintain the character of the residential neighborhoods and not allow too much development in the city, because the people who are here now really love the way it is now. And that the development that should occur in limited locations, in focused locations throughout the city. There was also a desire, and the preferred alternative does this, to maintain and expand a job focus and expand employment opportunities in the city. The preferred alternative allows mixed use development in strategic locations, and I will highlight those locations later. And as I mentioned previously, the preferred alternative maintains the Measure E cap. So the residential capacity is unchanged in the preferred alternative compared to what it is today. I'm going to walk through each of the specific areas with what the survey results were and then what that led us to with the preferred alternative. So in Rancho Conejo, the majority of respondents supported an even balance between lower and higher intensity industrial uses. There were different ideas. We asked a question about mixed use, and we showed different options for where mixed use could go in the Rancho Conejo area. And there were different ideas about whether it should be integrated in with the employment uses or whether it should be located adjacent to that. And there was support for increased residential density in this area as a method of infill development, and that's because it's not near existing lower density residential areas. This is the map for the Rancho Conejo area of the preferred alternative. I'm going to start in the northern side, and what the light gray is industrial low and the dark gray is industrial flex. So what we tried to do was to have a balance between industrial low and industrial flex. And it's really important for the city that this area really remain a job center. It's a very strong job center. It's part of the driver of the local economy, and businesses that are there want to expand. What we did to supplement this was, because there was a desire for mixed use, was that we added mixed use just north of 101. And you see this in the dark purple and the light purple. The light purple is mixed use low and the darker purple is mixed use medium. So we provided an opportunity for some mixed use development north of the freeway. There was also a desire for mixed use development south of the freeway, and we provided opportunity for that both east and west of Orchard Avenue. We know that the Alice property, as it's sometimes called, there was a lot of comments about this property, and the proposed idea here is to have a split between mixed use and residential in order to preserve and enhance or preserve the character of the residential neighborhoods, but also to allow an opportunity for housing and some commercial development in this area. For the Moore Park Road and West Thousand Oaks Boulevard area, there was clear direction from the survey to maintain commercial uses on Moore Park Road. And so the preferred alternative does that. Some of the alternatives presented mixed use in this area, but there was definitely clear direction to have more commercial uses and maintain this corridor as a commercial corridor. However, a lot of comments were made both at the GPAC meeting and in the public setting that the Oaks Mall and Jan's Marketplace are an opportunity for infill development and for mixed use, to re-envision some of these areas to allow greater diversity of uses. And one of the reasons is because we are having significant changes in the retail environment nationally. And these are opportunities that into the future, other objectives from the city can be achieved. We did a visual preference survey where we showed different images, if you'll remember, and for the Oaks Mall and Jan's Marketplace, 68 to 75% of the people, of the respondents to the survey supported 3 to 5 story residential and mixed use buildings in those areas. We also looked at a portion of Thousand Oaks Boulevard, of West Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and showed images as well. And 70 to 78% supported 3 to 5 story mixed use or multifamily in that area. The open-ended question here was question 14. 20% of people added a comment. A third of the people who added a comment said, I have no more comments. A third opposed any change in this area overall. And then a third either supported mixed use or had other suggestions for how development would go. And again, rest assured, there were again, 6,000 comments and our team read every single comment. And so we tried to do our best to categorize those as best we could in the process here. This map shows Moore Park Road, the land use designations, proposed land use designations in Moore Park Road and West Thousand Oaks Boulevard. I'm going to start on Moore Park Road, and you'll see this sort of light pink salmon color. I'm not quite sure what to call it. The upper right-hand picture here, and you see this is the commercial neighborhood, which is essentially just lower scale neighborhood serving commercial and retail uses. Jan's Marketplace and the Oaks Mall are designated as mixed use low to allow for flexibility in this area. They're both very large parcels, and when you multiply out the density times the area, it's actually quite a large number of units in this area. We know that there is still going to probably be a strong commercial focus here, but this allows flexibility for these uses to think about how this area could be re-envisioned. We maintained along part of the 101 freeway and then the Moore Park Road exit here. We maintained commercial uses. The dark red that you see here is the commercial regional, and that's for higher intensity commercial uses, and that could accommodate hotels. There are already at least one hotel in this area. And then along Thousand Oaks Boulevard, you'll see 2 designations. One to the east is mixed use low, and this area is the same designation as what is in the current Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan. And then there's the mixed use medium area, which already has quite a bit of development interest in this area. This is where the 299 Thousand Oaks Boulevard project is going in. And so this area is mixed use medium, which is up to 45 dwelling units per acre. It's also important to note here that, that some of the designation from the Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan was changed from mixed use to commercial. And you see this along the 101 freeway east of Moore Park Road. This area was designated or is currently designated as mixed use low. Given the proximity to the freeway, we were proposing that this might be a better area to maintain commercial uses and not to add mixed use development, which would allow residential. For the downtown and Thousand Oaks Boulevard area, there was overall support for mixed use and residential development in this area, and support for densities of greater than 30 units an acre. In fact, more than 75% of people who responded said that they'd be willing to allow development of either 45 units an acre or 60 units an acre. And that is just for the downtown area, the 45 to 60. But overall, for Thousand Oaks Boulevard, there is support for mixed use development. One of the questions that we asked early on in the survey for the citywide questions was, what areas do you think there should be residential development? And the area that got the most votes is the downtown and Thousand Oaks Boulevard area. So again, there was strong support in the survey for this. More than 3/4 of the respondents said that this is an area for residential development. There was also support for allowing some standalone residential buildings along Thousand Oaks Boulevard. In other words, don't require that every building have retail space. Allow there to be just some multifamily buildings in select locations in order to spark development and allow for more multifamily housing in the area. 20% of respondents added a question or added a comment to question 18. This was the open-ended question. And in this, in the responses, the open-ended comments were divided between those who wanted to see limited change in this area and those who wanted to have a mixed-use district with housing, retail, employment, and entertainment uses. This is the map of the downtown and Thousand Oaks Boulevard area, and it tracks relatively closely with the Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan with a couple of changes. The changes, and so what you see here in the dark purple is the downtown area. The blue is the Civic Arts Plaza, where we all wish we could be this evening having a meeting. But this is the dark purple is an area that allows, is mixed use medium. And then you see the lighter purple, which is mixed use low. And you see that both east and west of the downtown civic core. You'll also notice that there are some of the areas are commercial neighborhood. These are areas where we expected that there would not be any, that these areas could remain commercial over the time horizon of the general plan. They are currently mixed use right now in the Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan, but we're proposing that they be moved to commercial neighborhood, either because they have existing commercial uses on them. For example, just west of Conejo School Road and north of Thousand Oaks Boulevard is the Toyota dealer. On the other side of the street, they're very small parcels that wouldn't necessarily allow for mixed use development, and they may be better suited for commercial. And then over at the Rancho exit to 101, this area is a good area to maintain commercial uses. One more note to point here, apologies, that surrounding the Thousand Oaks Boulevard corridor is a lot of our residential neighborhoods. And these are some of the neighborhoods in the city that have multifamily housing. And what we tried to do in this area is generally match the land use designation that is there today in these areas, or for the single family areas that already built, match what's on the ground right now and not allow higher intensity development in those single family areas. For the Westlake and East End, what we heard from the survey is that there is a desire to expand the employment district near Hampshire Road and the Townsgate Road area, to expand employment uses along Thousand Oaks Boulevard on the east end of the city and south of the high school. There was a very strong direction to maintain commercial only uses and not mixed use at the Westlake Plaza and Center. There was support for adding mixed use development along Thousand Oaks Boulevard and the Westlake Boulevard intersection, but there wasn't a lot of clarity in terms of where that should be located. So there was a desire to keep mixed use, but it was not clear from the alternatives where that would be. So we have proposed an idea and certainly want comments on that. And then there was also a desire to keep the area on Thousand Oaks Boulevard, west of Westlake Boulevard. Apologies for the direction here, I'll show you on the map, but to keep that as commercial. And that's essentially the area that has the auto dealers and across the street from the auto dealers. For this area, question number 23 was an open-ended question for additional ideas, and only 15% of people responded to open-ended questions. About 2/3, 3/4 of those were not wanting any change in this area, and then the other responses was a balance between other ideas and ideas for mixed-use development. This is the map of the Westlake and the proposed land use designations in the Westlake and East End area. I'm going to start out by the site here in the on the west side, which is the Kmart site and across the street. This area is designated as mixed use low. We know that there's a development concept for the former Kmart site, but we also think that the area could be enhanced by allowing a sort of a mirror project across the street from that. The Townsgate industrial area, the Townsgate employment area is north and south of Townsgate Road. While the survey did identify a potential having a mix of intensity of the types of jobs in this area, what we're proposing here is a little bit different, which is to maintain the existing industrial designation, and that is to allow, to ensure that there are spaces in the city to allow a diversity of types of jobs and not to necessarily encourage more intense office or commercial development throughout the whole city, but to kind of leave part of this area as a lower scale industrial and employment area. The Westlake Plaza, you'll see here, is a commercial neighborhood that maintains the existing designation, and then just north of that is a commercial area, that commercial town and commercial regional, that would allow hotels and office. Across the Ventura Freeway, you see the Auto Mall, which in all of the alternatives had the designation of commercial neighborhood, which maintains the commercial uses and allows the auto dealers to continue. Across the street from that, and all on the north side of Thousand Oaks Boulevard, are commercial uses, and that was it seemed like that was a preference in the survey to allow commercial uses to continue in those areas. At the intersection of Westlake Boulevard and Thousand Oaks Boulevard is where mixed use low was proposed in the alternatives, and it seemed like there was some preference for this area, as well as the potential for mixed use to be located in this area. The survey also indicated that the area across from the high school, the employment area, should actually be intensified, and you'll see this area here as industrial flex, which allows for higher intensity job and employment uses. For the village centers, these are the 7 commercial centers located throughout the city. We asked a question about whether they should all remain commercial, whether they should all be allowed to have mixed use, or whether there should be a combination. And there was general support for maintaining commercial uses within the village centers. The open-ended questions which is question 26, was split here between keeping them as they are or allowing mixed use in those areas. And what we propose based on the result is that all of these village centers would essentially remain as commercial, and with policies in the general plan to encourage these areas to be more of a village center, which is a more inviting environment for people to come and have a neighborhood gathering place, a neighborhood meeting and gathering place. And so that's the proposed direction in the village centers. We're almost done kind of going through. This shows the mix and the number, the acres of each of the uses in the preferred alternative. I want to again highlight two things. You'll see the asterisks on neighborhood low and neighborhood mediums. And these are designations that probably need to be further calibrated within the subcategories to reflect the current densities. One of the reasons, I know there's a question about why this is happening and why we're doing this, and let me see if I can answer that now, which is that because of the cap because of the Measure E cap, we need to maintain about 81,000 housing units. And so we need to transfer some of the capacity from the residential neighborhoods into the potential growth mixed use areas in the areas of change. Right now, we actually don't know, we don't have a clear direction from the city council on those areas. And we don't have a clear direction on what's going to be mixed use and what's going to remain commercial. And that is going to have an impact on the total numbers. And so our process is to figure out what's going on first with the areas of change. And then the designations will be tweaked slightly in the residential neighborhoods to make sure that we're lining up the amount of capacity so that we're not exceeding the Measure E cap. A couple of other things to point out here is that that open space and parks account and still account for about 46% of the total land area in the city, and that the commercial uses, commercial neighborhood, town, and regional, and the industrial uses actually account for a very small percentage overall, as do the mixed use uses. They only account for 1.6% of the total land area in the city. Looking at this information another way, this is a pie chart of the preferred alternative. 83% of the land area in the city is made up of neighborhood rural, neighborhood very low, neighborhood low, open space, parks, natural, and then golf courses. And you see that here in the pie chart with the green and the yellow. The remaining 17% is made up of all of the other designations. So the 5% is made up of the residential low, medium, and higher. And so that would be things that would allow duplex, triplex, small lot, single family, townhome, and up to small apartment. And then what you see here is that the mixed use is about 1%, just over 1% of the total area in the city. And ultimately, that is what we're looking at now. And I know that that is what some of the concern is about where mixed use is allowed. It's also important to note that the existing general plan allows mixed use right now, and it allows mixed use all along Thousand Oaks Boulevard corridor. And so there are, in fact, a very limited number of areas in the city where we added mixed use through this process. And they're identified here, and they're circled here in the map. And starting on the east side of the city, you have the mixed use parcels, mixed use located at or proposed at the intersection of Thousand Oaks Boulevard and Westlake. Moving over the Kmart site and across the street, which I believe is in Southern California Edison area, which may not change in the future. And then you have the Oaks, the Lakes, not the Oaks, the Lakes parking lot, and the Lakes, which currently doesn't allow residential, but it is proposed to add residential to this area to enhance the vibrancy of the downtown area. Moving further west, you have the Oaks Mall and Jan's Marketplace, which were commercial and are being proposed to allow mixed use. And then you have an area in Rancho Conejo to expand housing opportunities in this area, both north and south of the freeway. And when it comes right down to it, these are essentially the only areas where mixed use is being added to the plan and really The other point to note is that you see the dark purple here on the west side of Thousand Oaks Boulevard, as well as in the downtown here. And those are areas where there's a proposed increase from 30 units an acre to 45 units an acre maximum, and an additional 8 feet of height in order to accommodate the extra intensity in that area. And so ultimately, that's what the plan boils down to, and the changes is this area where currently there isn't mixed use, where we're proposing to add mixed use development. The next steps in the process before we get into our breakout groups and our discussions is we have a preferred land use alternative survey that's open through May 12th. We're going to receive comments and direction from the Planning Commission on April 26th. This feedback will be compiled and presented the recommended changes to the City Council on May 18th, and then we'll receive direction from the City Council on May 25th. So we're moving through the alternatives here. What we'd like to do now is to move into breakout groups. And we're again going to have two options. We're going to allow the public, the GPAC is going to be in one breakout group, and then the public can move into smaller groups to discuss or listen to the GPAC meetings. So we want to allow for more participation from everyone to get your comments and ideas. You're going to have if you're interested, you're going to be put into a group, a breakout group. And if you don't want to be in that breakout group, you can come back into the main room. What we would like you to do in the groups is to discuss each area, ask questions, and then discuss each area. And what we'd love feedback on, of course, anything that you want to tell us, but really, what did you like about the preferred alternative overall and for each area? And then what changes do you think still need to be made? Consensus is not required. We actually are going to do a quick report back to the full group so the GPAC can hear what you're saying and what you've said. And then we are going to have a facilitator and a recorder to record your comments. With that, and I think that just because I'm sure that people have a lot of questions, I think it would be better to handle those in the smaller groups. So we are going to break into the smaller groups. Again, the GPAC is going to remain in in this main room, and then the public can go into the breakout rooms. As we're doing this, I'd like to actually do something here, and I'd like to see if there are members of the public who would, is there anyone who would prefer to stay and listen to the GPAC conversation, not participate in it, but listen to the GPAC conversation rather than go into the small groups? And if you would like to just stay and listen, please raise your hand and we will mark those. Michael, I assume you're marking this. I see 5 people, 6 people now, 7. And so give us a second to get organized here with this.
Yeah, give me a minute to do this. And also, if the interpreter would please announce if we have any Spanish speakers, they will also need to stay in the main room because that's where the translation service is occurring. So if they could raise their hands also, so I can be sure not to move them into a room. And then again, we're going to answer questions when we get into the breakout rooms, and the facilitators will be able to answer those questions.
Matt, there's also people who are, raising their hands, but not doing the emoji, the hand emoji.
Oh, okay. Oh, I apologize. And I can't see everyone. So is there anyone who would, if you guys could, Michael, you've seen people who are raising their hands and not doing the hand emoji?
I'm going through and looking as well.
I'm seeing,
either raise your hand.
Yeah, please raise your hand because that'll put you at the top of the list. And I'm setting it so that you can exit the room on your own. So if I accidentally put you into a breakout room and you didn't want to be there, you'll have the option to come back to the main room on your own.
Okay.
I see Danielle Borgia, Becca Whitnall have also raised their hands, and Anthony Scott, but they don't have they're not using the hand emoji. And
we don't have a raise hand button.
Right. Okay.
It's under the reactions. If you have a reactions tab, it's under there now.
Yeah.
There are older clients of Zoom that are not updated to have that feature.
That's unfortunate.
Okay, well, if you're unable to raise your hand and you want to be in the main room, just click return to main room as soon as you go out.
And again, just a reminder, what we would like is that those who are choosing to stay in the GPAC room, it's going to be for the GPAC discussion, and you'll be listening in, and the rest of folks in the breakout rooms will participate and give comments and feedback.
I saw that Karen Wilburn had her hand raised. Karen, do you still? Okay. Michael, I don't know if you see that, but Karen Wilburn?
Yes.
Okay.
We have how long in the breakout rooms? About 30 minutes, 40 minutes?
We have about 45 minutes, about 40 minutes in the breakout rooms to go through, and then we're going to come back. The facilitators should give a very quick summary of what you heard in those breakout rooms. And then we're going to have a discussion with the GPAC and just what we'd like from the GPAC, ultimately from each of you, and we're going to go through sort of in turn, is what your recommendation is, because we want to give a recommendation to council, and then if you have any specific comments. So recommendation on the preferred alternative and any specific comments. So be prepared to state your opinion. And we will call on you this time. All right, Michael, how you doing there?
Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry. This is taking too long trying to split people up into the 3 rooms. So I'm just going to boot everybody into a room. And if you want to come back to the main room, then please just click the button. It's going to make it a lot easier than waiting.
Okay, so if you, I know
to do this.
A large number of you wanted to stay in the GPAC. Everyone who's in the public is going to get moved to a room, and then once you are in that room, you can exit back to us here with GPAC. Apologies for that. We're even a year into this. We're still working on the technology. Not quite perfect yet.
Doing breakout rooms on the fly is difficult. So thank you for your patience. Okay, let's give this a whirl. Give it a minute to see I see some people popping back.
Should probably turn off mute before I start talking. Always a good thing.
Yes. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. That was unintentional. Is David in here also?
Okay, I think we should get going here. So we have about 45 minutes, and again, for the GPAC members, what I would like to have us do is to first we can maybe do questions for a little while, and then I think it would be helpful to go through just overall what your reaction to the preferred alternative is. We can go area by area, first citywide, and then area by area. So why don't we start? And I think if we could use, does everyone have the raise hand feature available? Okay, so if we could use the raise hand feature, if for some reason you don't, start speaking up at an appropriate time, clearly not when someone else is speaking, but speak up at an appropriate time so we can make sure we get everyone's voice heard tonight. Okay, let's start with some of the questions. So Victor?
So
go ahead and unmute. There you are.
I think we did a lot of work and looked at a lot of different things. And I know the answer is probably going to be that this comes later, but I think there's an important piece that's missing that I think we need to do revolved around the plans, and that's schools. And the impact to the schools, I think, is significant and important. My experience and my opinion is that, a lot of people purchase homes and residences. They're looking to raise a family at some point. They're thinking about what schools their kids are going to go to. So I think people's positions may change if they realize that, if additional residences in one particular area of town over another are, have the potential to change or redraw the school district boundary lines, meaning that if you live in this residence, this is your elementary school that your child will go to. So for example, development on the side of Thousand Oaks nearest Westlake. So the school district has two schools there, Westlake Elementary, Westlake Hills. Both of those schools are at or near capacity. So any additional residential development is going to present a challenge in those schools, or would have to, the school district would have to look at redistricting or redrawing lines to ensure that the kids have space in particular schools, or end up having to do large expansions. So I think that's something that really has to be considered. And no matter where it is on the boulevard, it's going to impact where children who move into any of these residences are going to go to school, which is going to impact traffic, which is going to impact the overall formation of the district and how enrollment goes across the school district. So I think that's something that we need to look at, because I think that has some significant effect on people's decisions and what the overall, we're looking about quality of life in the city, and the things that we're proud of, and I think the school district is one of them, and I think it's something that needs to be included in this conversation.
Great, and I think you answered your own question. We right now it's concepts, and there's a little bit of catch-22 with all of this. So we don't have the answer to that right now because we don't know overall, and we also don't know what the makeup will be. So there is a catch-22, but not that your point is invalid, but we need to think about character as well. Is there another comment or any other question? See, Laura, your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to ask about the village centers again. I know that those have not been included based on the survey input that was received, but Matt, when you were making your presentation, and maybe I didn't clearly hear what you said, but I'm a little confused by it, because I thought you were saying that there are no land use changes proposed with respect to having village centers, yet that there would be policies that encourage that sort of an aesthetic. And I just wasn't clear what that means and how the city would work towards that concept without changing land uses.
Yeah, so essentially what we started, I think, understanding was that there were a mix of ideas about what those existing commercial shopping centers could be in the future. And I think when some people were talking about village centers, they were talking about adding mixed use development or adding residential development. And then I think other people were talking about just having a different kind of format that felt more like a main street that still is just commercial uses, but not adding residential to those areas. And so that was what I said, was that the land use would still remain and is proposed to remain commercial, but that we can have policies to encourage revitalization of those so that it's not necessarily a big parking lot with, retail uses, but it may be more of like a nice walkable Main Street area that is more conducive to community interaction and hanging out.
Okay, but still in a commercial setting versus incorporating residential.
Yes, that wasn't clear.
And so with this being a long-term plan, I'm just wondering if down the road, there's kind of a change in community acceptance of the village center type of an approach. And there might be a property where there could be a potential for revitalization that could incorporate a residential component. Are we saying that's totally off the table, or is that something that would be looked at through like a general plan amendment process? Or
Laura, you just said it would be looked at through a general plan amendment process. And, I have to say Thousand Oaks is unique in that Measure E caps the ability it makes it more difficult to have the ability to make changes like that in the future. But, typically in a community that doesn't have a total growth cap like Measure E does, it would just go through a general plan amendment process. There would be a conversation about it. But because of Measure E, it makes it more difficult because you then have to take that capacity, the residential capacity from elsewhere in the city in order to apply it to the process.
okay. All right, thank you.
But there's always the possibility of updating the general plan. I mean, that can always happen and it can transfer. It's just more difficult. Okay, the next person who I believe raised their hand is Karen. You are on mute.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And thank you for another. No, I've unmuted myself. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I'm not muted. Okay, thank you. Very supportive of the alternative land use. I think it's going to be beautiful and exciting, but moving forward, people listen to details. And I know that this is a big picture concept right now, but my recommendation would be that when you make the presentation to the Planning Commission, to the City Council, or if you do any more surveys, you need to remind people, I would think, that all the new buildings are certainly going to be energy efficient. All the new buildings are certainly going to make extensive use of solar energy. And obviously the new residential units are going to have buried utilities. There won't be, like I have in my backyard, power poles. And along with energy efficient, all these new areas are going to be beautiful because they're going to have green space. We talk about, mixed use light and mixed use heavy, but I think we need to remind people that of course there's going to be greenery. And of course there's going to be maybe pocket parks and urban gardens and greenways for people to walk among from community to community, because I think that's what we long for. The artist's renderings are beautiful, but I think we need to hear, because we live in a community that is so sensitive to the relationship between our environment and our well-being. We need to address that verbally as well as in any more written materials that go out. And I think, those of us on the GPAC who have been meeting for 2 years now, we've heard a lot of speakers and we get that. We know we know that this is going to be attended to, but I think in talking to other people about these land use alternatives, we need to remind them. That's
a great
all.
reminder. Thank you very much. Yes, we do get lost in the big picture sometimes and not look at the details, which are what matter. Fully agree with that. Jennifer, you are next.
Hi, it probably won't come to the surprise of anyone that I want to talk more about the village centers. I want to pick up on what Laura brought up and also touch on what Victor said. From where I sit and dozens of folks I've talked to, I feel like it would be a missed opportunity to not include the option for mixed use and some housing in at least sort of the core set of village centers that we're in alternative 1. I think that meets a variety of intersecting interests of the city in terms of economic neighborhoods that appeal to the young millennial and Gen Z tech workers. We're trying to create a biotech hub here. The neighborhood feel, the walkability, the critical mass of people living close by who can walk and support the local businesses we hope will be in those village centers. I'm sort of envisioning European high streets within neighborhoods kind of thing with, I've talked about how I have this vision of being able to walk to my local village center, have an outdoor dinner at a locally owned cafe and catch a shuttle to the Civic Arts Plaza and then back and have a drink at a locally owned wine bar in that same village center. And that it'll be thriving and attended, bustling with people of all different ages and income levels. There's the equity issue of having that diversity of housing and that's affordable and different kinds of places for people to live, and for seniors or empty nesters, which I will be in just a few years, who can stay in the neighborhood, but open up a single family home for a younger family. And then it spreads some of that density and some of that increased residential capacity throughout the city, not all concentrated along the boulevard, for the sake of helping support schools. We've got a lot of neighborhoods where elementary schools have closed because the folks in the neighborhood are aging out. How do we sort of revitalize those in addition? Reduces driving overall if we're not all trying to drive to Tarantula Hill all the time, or Stonehouse all the time and fight for parking there. Less housing along the freeway and the environmental considerations there if we put housing a little bit throughout other spots in the city. So for a variety of reasons, I just really feel like the village centers represent some significant opportunity for us.
Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate that comment and know that there are a large number of people who feel passionate about that. So we tried to follow the survey, but certainly that's a comment that can move up to Planning Commission and Council, the ultimate decision makers with that. Okay, next, Fred.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for letting me speak. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
All right. I have a question and a comment regarding the vacant property at Borchard Road adjacent to the 101 as it affects the local residents, the residential homeowners that are either adjacent or nearby. According to the map, that area is marked mixed use medium. Is that correct?
No, I believe that area is split between single family residential and mixed use low.
Okay, but okay, because I thought the allowed uses there were office, commercial, and multi-family housing, so that is incorrect?
As I said, the parcel in I can pull it up. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, because what I'm getting to is, what is the maximum height that is allowed going vertical there?
Well, again, the whole parcel is large, and so we divided the parcel. So what we did was the areas adjacent to the single family neighborhood maintain a residential designation to allow for a transition. And then the area along Orchard and the freeway would be mixed use low, which is 50 feet, the story there. And the residential's,
with that in mind,
has that transition.
With
so
that in mind,
it's not right next to the single family residential.
Okay, thank you. Well, then 50 feet would accommodate ordinarily going vertical how many stories?
4 stories of residential.
Okay, because for the benefit of the local residents there, that's what I was concerned about. But and then in full disclosure, I happened to have a personal conversation with Sean Meradian, whose family owns that property. And he had some ideas. I mean, during our conversation, I didn't know he was going to propose this, but educate me. But he had his own ideas as far as the development of that property. And in short, I was willing to listen. And it turned out that he had a mixture of commercial and residential, which seemed overall, just real quickly, to be a win-win in my particular mind that answered questions of congestion, traffic-wise, enjoyment of the community, addressing housing also for people who might be working in the biotech, Amgen and that area. And it seemed to be a feasible idea. But I asked him, has this gone out? And he said, he's talked to certain people, but I said, why don't you just let the public know, so especially the residents of that local area, so that they can be informed of what some ideas are. And I'm hoping that he's going to be attending this meeting tonight, so that maybe he can, in short, just make everybody, the local citizenry, aware. So that's my comment. That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Nick.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I know you partially addressed this in the main presentation, but I was curious how the sort of looking at this map here, the three main areas of mixed use medium were determined. Why, of all the mixed use areas, those three specific areas, City Hall, Tarantula Hill, and then the one parcel in Rancho Conejo were chosen to be the medium density regions as opposed to all the other ones being low?
Excellent question with that. We did have a lot of conversations internally about that because, when we present broad concepts, we have to hone in a little bit. The area around the Civic Arts Plaza has always been envisioned as a higher intensity area as the downtown. And so that was sort of a logical area to have the mixed use medium to allow for some more intense uses. The area around on the west side of Thousand Oaks Boulevard, where 299 is, and Tarantula Hill, the reason that area was identified is because you're already seeing a kind of some energy in that area, and you're seeing this synergy of uses that are happening there, and that there is the potential by having a little bit more density in that area to encourage that, so that really becomes a sort of a destination and a node to achieve some of the things that that Jennifer was talking about with the village centers. I mean, that could be kind of like a new village center, different than the shopping areas, but an entertainment village center for a certain lifestyle. And so that's why that area was selected. And then the area in Rancho Conejo was selected because of the proximity, sort of the adjacency to the commercial uses. And we thought that might be a good area to almost create another node and encourage development, a higher intensity node there. There was certainly the possibility of, and it was presented in the alternatives of Jan's Marketplace and the Oaks Mall. Those areas are very large, and we didn't want to put too much density in those areas and so we would expect that those areas would have a mix of uses because they're bigger parcels, a bigger mix of uses, and so that you could have some higher intensity and lower intensity areas that kind of spread throughout those parcels, which is why those areas weren't selected for that.
Great, thank you. That's exactly what I was looking to hear. So awesome.
And just to also say, there's no, this was our best attempt based on what we heard from the community. And so, again, we would love comments on whether that decision was correct based on the comments we've heard so far. And then if you have other suggestions, that we can certainly, push those up to Planning Commission and Council. All right, next, Chase. We can't hear you. Let's try again. Are you on your phone?
Okay.
There we go.
I had a couple of comments. First off, I do think that the village centers, those places should have some room to those designations there should be room for those places to evolve, because with retail decaying, I mean, we've had a pandemic. We don't know what will happen with a lot of those places, so they need room to evolve. And if mixed use eventually is an option for them, a workable option, they should have room to evolve, because if they need to change, then they may end up applying for, like a a land use change in the future. And second, I was thinking about that area around Borchard Road and the fact that it was split. I'm not sure if adding additional single family tracks should even be an option, because there are so many of them already in the city. And moving forward, I'm not sure it is sustainable to do that because of reasons of affordability and for traffic, because if you create, more single family neighborhoods, I mean, that's definitely going to create more traffic. And I think when we're thinking about, places that are like the last areas of vacant land in the city, places that have never been built on, there needs to be flexibility in those designations. And I'm not sure that single family, splitting it with single family is the best idea. So those were my comments.
Thank you. And then just want to check, Fred, do you have your hand up again, or did you just not take it down? I just want to make sure to know whether it should come back to you.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was a mistake.
That's fine. No worries. Just wanted to make sure I knew where everyone was in line with this. Okay, Mick.
Thanks. And I'm again, I think probably going to come from a historical perspective of where we've kind of come from the city, and my view and being part of some of these city decisions, as well as bringing some additional information for context of thinking about the plan. In general, my main concern is about the scope of the change. I think it is incredibly large. It is probably the largest plan for the change of increased development in the city in its 60 years, especially since the general plan was enacted 50 years ago. The disappointment I guess I have in this is the choices we have are more about, given the size of it, where would you like the changes in that, as opposed to any alternatives of the scope of such change. Does it have to be as big as it is being presented, or are there options for the commission and the council to entertain to address things that are of real concern with the city, such as meeting the RENA allocation numbers to meet our fair share of the housing crisis needs, as well as some items of ensuring zoning is consistent with general plan designations, and there can be some real penalties for the city and for some neighborhoods if those aren't addressed properly. But does that require such a full scope and sizable change in order to do that? I think that there is a potential where it gives, and especially making sweeping changes where local jurisdictions are really hamstrung over the next 4 years of being able to make changes to address these. Sacramento has severely limited them. So making very large sweeping changes now could have some potentially detrimental effects. And are there ways that we can take a significant step forward, addressing the things we need to now, taking the information that the GPAC has created and using that as a time-phased ability to move into that if that's where the community wants to go. It gives people more time to adjust to those changes and gives the council more flexibility of being able to handle them. One additional comment I think is also important. There sometimes is a sense that density in and of itself will create affordability. And there's been some research that has been presented to Livable California by Patrick Condon, who's a University of British Columbia professor who's been a big advocate of urban areas increasing density to create affordability. And he's actually reversed his course on that, primarily by saying if merely density in and of itself does not necessarily bring affordability, you need to have policies that force that density to be affordable, such as inclusionary housing ordinances or rent control, because otherwise all it does is lead to land speculation. It just leads to the increases in the property values going up. And then when people buy or rent into them, they just become market rate and become more expensive. So I feel as a comprehensive policy for the city they really need to think of that. By the way, if anybody knows, we may think that we've never had rent control in this city. We have. 1980 to 1987, there was a rent control ordinance. We have one for mobile homes right now, but there was an actual full rent control ordinance in Thousand Oaks. So food for thought for the complete picture.
Yeah, Nick, thank you. I think you are spot on with you need to think comprehensively about these policies, and it's not just about the land use. So I couldn't agree more with that. And we know that in a lot of, I'll just say that for the group, that in a lot of the smaller conversations we had, which Mick, I don't think you were part of, the idea of a really strong inclusionary housing ordinance actually came up quite a bit. So that's been sort of percolating up through the process, and they certainly can go hand in hand with that. So it's a really good comment. I appreciate that. All right, Darren, you're next.
Great, thanks. So Mick is always a tough act to follow. I feel dumber every time I have to follow him. So Mick always has great information, so thank you for sharing. So I wanted to focus on some comments that I had about the kind of the mixed use designations and focused around kind of the Oaks Mall and the Jan's Marketplace area. I think there's some inconsistency, and I don't think it was intentional. It was more in the drafting that the mixed use designations, low, medium, and high, all have kind of different allowed uses. And an example of that is mixed use low allows retail and restaurants, where mixed use medium does not. And then mixed use high has hotel, where the others don't. So I think that's more of a drafting thing. So I think that needs to be corrected to allow for whenever there's a mixed use designation that all those uses be allowed. I think it's not so much a concern of the uses as it is, the height and the density. So hotel needs to be included, I think, in the mixed use definition. So if I'd urge the city to look at those allowed uses and combine them, it doesn't make any sense to have necessarily different uses for different densities when a retail or a restaurant could be in all the different uses. So that's my comment on that. I think mixed use, I noticed that the Oaks Mall and Jan's, which I think are a great area to talk about mixed use development. I think the mixed use low designation is insufficient to accommodate the flexibility needed for future evolution of these shopping centers. The Oaks Mall's got a more traditional configuration, but Jan's in particular is a little bit unique, where there's retail up front, and then you have the internal part, and there's a parking structure, and there's retail spaces kind of in the back. I think we'd be better served to have more of a mixed use medium. I think mixed use high was terminated. I think there's areas of Jan's Marketplace and potentially the Oaks that mixed use high could be used in certain portions of the property and for certain uses, like hotel as an example. I think mixed use medium is probably a better designation for these properties, given what may need to take place. These properties are surrounded by commercial streets, not a lot of residential. They're on the freeway. I think one concern, Matt, that you mentioned earlier, which is obviously correct, is that these properties are very large. So if you give a global designation, you can actually convert the entire property to residential. You have too many units, and that would go against Measure E. However, what about an idea of creating maybe kind of a specific, designation for these two properties, whereby the units are capped, where at least there's portions of the property that can be redeveloped, where maybe there's retail up front, and then because Jan's is an example, we have a parking structure, they can accommodate a lot more, for the parking, so there won't be as much traffic. So I think that's something to consider. I think the mixed use medium height, maybe 58 feet, maybe a little bit low, maybe it goes to 60, but maybe there's some areas of the shopping centers that the Oaks and Jan's that can be redesignated for certain uses for certain heights. I think that'll be important going forward, as obviously retail is changing. So that's my comment there.
So Darren, can I just ask a clarifying question on that, just to make sure I understand what you were saying? So, the kind of allowed uses in the description, I agree with you on that. I think we all as a team know that we have cleanup to do with that. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. For the flexibility, are you essentially saying sort of allow more flexibility in height and where the mass is throughout the parcel, while keeping the number of units, maybe on the lower side, or the number of units is the mixed use low, what it would accommodate, but allow for some flexibility in height?
I think that, yeah, Matt, I think that's right. I think Jan's and the Oaks are always going to have a commercial aspect to them. There's leases, and we want to have a theater, and we want to have Ulta and Petco, and all those uses up front. But I think there are certain areas of Jan's, in particular, like the old Marshall space as an example. I can tell you from personal experience that it'll be a challenge to have that space turn into a retail tenant. So having the ability, maybe the Burlington area back around the backside of Jan's where the parking structure is, I think there's areas where there won't be an issue with height from a public standpoint, blocking people's views and other things, as Fred had mentioned, and I know is concerned about. I think there's ways to maybe bifurcate the property to allow for some higher, some heights for certain uses in different parts of the center. Well, we don't need to have 45 dwelling units per acre and so on. I think you're right about that.
Okay, great. Thank you for allowing me to ask the clarification question.
Yep.
There. All right, Andy.
Good evening, Matt. Just great job again by you and your team for handling how this civic engagement process has gone. Just so impressed and impressed well with my teammates here on the committee. Some great comments and questions. I actually have a few questions and then some observations based on what I've heard some of my fellow committee members. You mentioned there has not been clear direction for the council on where these land uses are. One of the questions I had is coming from the benefit of some experience. Council some years back, if I recall, identified some opportunity sites. And so I was just wondering if those were incorporated into, I have the list here, and some of them are on your map. Council was pretty clear that they saw those opportunity sites as clearly areas for this exact conversation with respect to mixed use and some higher densities. I was just curious if those opportunity sites have been incorporated into the latest map.
Well, thanks, Andy. Yeah, we that was the Cosmont study that you were referring to. But yeah, we did look at that. That was part of the formation process of how we got to where we were to identify some of those opportunity sites. But we then moved into the public process here, where we asked the community what they wanted, and sort of this is where we ended up with that.
Okay.
I didn't mean to imply that the council hasn't given clear direction. I think the council will need to give us direction ultimately. They have certainly provided some input, but as we started this process, and I believe you were on the council at this time, we want it to be a community-led process to lead up to the council to then make that decision. And so that's the way we're approaching this.
Okay. What I would say is, I think now it's at some point that those sites ought to be looked at. Many of them are actually on your list. I think you've identified some of them, but the Kmart site, the Nazarbekian site, the Oaks Mall. What wasn't on the list was the Jan's Mall. I certainly would add that. And then certainly the Borchardt property. I think you references the Alice property. And then I would add a couple that aren't on the map. I'm aware that the YMCA property at the north end of Moore Park Road is, they're looking to sell that property and relocate the YMCA. I think that has some opportunities there for some type of mixed use or some type of housing. And then I don't think the Caruso property was on that list, but that's already been looked at by council. The other question I had is, you referenced working. I'm going to work my way kind of from east to west, if it's okay from your map. Starting with the Westlake Boulevard area, you identified both sides of Westlake Boulevard for mixed use. And one of the challenges that I think with this map is kind of looking at just parcels is, of course, those are well-developed commercial centers. You got the Promenade on one side, and then you got the Bed Bath & Beyond on the other side. The reality is neither of those parcels is going to have any housing. They're not going to knock those buildings down and put in any kind of housing. So my question is the reality of the property, kind of the ground zero, what's really existing. How are we looking to address housing in that area realistically, if we're going to actually try to put some housing there?
Well, so, I think actually I might want to turn it back to you. I mean, I think this is part of that recommendation side, which is if you think that that those are not the appropriate places, but yet housing should be located on the east side of the city or mixed use, where should it go?
Okay.
You know, so, I don't mean to put it right back. But,
no, you know what? I'm glad you did, because again, I'm going to go point to council's already taken action on the property on the east side of Westlake Boulevard. I believe it's called One Baxter. It's a large parcel. I can certainly see why there would be concern about a general plan designation that would allow for more units than they're looking for. I would encourage maybe develop another general plan designation for those large parcels. Because the good thing about this is we have an open palette. The city can do whatever they want to do. But that's a clearly an underutilized parcel. Again, they're not knocking down that office building. So I think you do have to look at the kind of what's really on the ground and where council has already taken some and given some direction. So one of my recommendations would be is that property there, the One Baxter, probably ought to be slated for some type of some type of housing, low, medium, however you want to put it in there. But realistically, they're not going to be able to develop. And that's an opportunity for a village site. Again, if we're going to look at what's really on the ground, that's an opportunity. It's directly next to the promenade. And that's got some exciting opportunities for housing, for some employment, for some industrial, and really some synergy with what's next to promenade. So that's the one piece. Moving to the west, I think you already did a good job of addressing Teal Boulevard. I would say this, that I try to stay as pure to the specific plan as you can. Council and the community have put years, decades into the boulevard. And once again, I'm going to say the same thing that I said in the earlier meetings. The reality is there's only a few parcels that actually that are going to be developed on Thousand Oaks. One of them is Nazareth Beacon. They are not going to, bring in the wrecking ball and knock down a bunch of properties to build residential. It's not cost effective. It's not going to happen. So, but in fairness to the property owners on the boulevard that were told that we're going to have a specific plan, I would try to stay as pure as you can, to that. So that would be a recommendation. I think you addressed the Oaks Mall and the Jans Mall, but again, it's the recurring theme. They're not going to bring a wrecking ball in and start knocking down both those malls. There is some open area, and clearly the Jans Mall needs some help, and I know the Oaks is looking for it. So I would recommend, again, I think some of the other speakers talked about, give those areas some max flexibility, and maybe even the medium density. Because again, they're not going to develop that whole site. And so it's already been identified. I think there was a lot of support in the community for some mix there. I would give those opportunity sites the max flexibility, and then let council and the planning commission do the normal process, work its way through as these proposals come through. And then finally, the Borchard Road site, a couple of folks had mentioned that. Council's looked at this since back when I first started in the council. It's one of the few undeveloped sites. I can tell everyone that I know there was an interest in continuing that residential. Those folks that live there now, they're not interested in having single family dwellings built behind them. They're going to want a buffer. That's what they want. They do not want houses behind them. I understand where the thought process is. They're going to want a buffer. And so, and it's a very large piece of property. I would give maximum flexibility to that property, make it low mixed use, medium mixed use, whatever, but maximum flexibility so you can put some lakes. I know Fred looked at a plan, some buffer, some open space, something that actually complements Newberry Park, that Newberry Park's been asking for a long time. We've looked over the years at a lot of different uses there, and they were absolute mixed uses. And one thing I would say adamantly is single family dwelling is the last thing you want to put in that property. You already have plenty of it out there. And again, these property owners, for the most part, are longtime resident business owners in the community. Let's work collaboratively with them, the Oaks, the Jans, Borchard, in Westlake. Let's work collaboratively with them to come up with these plans, because as you pointed out, there's very isolated areas where we're actually going to put housing. And so I just think that we some of these areas need some tweaking. Borchard's one of them. And then the other one that I think really needs to be looked at is transfer the units that are at the promenade and at the Bed Bath and Beyond that are never going to be used. Bump some of those over to the other side. And if you need to give it a new general plan designation to limit the perceived number of units, we'll then think about that. But all in all, really, really good job. Really, really good job. Congratulate your team.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Andy. So we're, and I see a couple more hands up, Nick and Karen again. I want to, we're going to, I think, come back together. Michael, how much time do we have? Do you know when folks are coming back?
We had originally planned 50 minutes for these groups, and that is 7 minutes from now.
Okay.
If we want to stick to the 50 minutes.
So, Nick and Karen, before you go, I'd like to do two things. One is when we all come back together, when the public comes back, what we're going to do is we're going to have the facilitators from those groups give a brief report out of what those groups talked about, because I think it's important. It was important for two things. One, it's important for the public to have a chance for them to express their ideas. And two, I think it's important for you to hear some of the high level direction that they are giving so that it can help your thinking. The second is, the comments you all are saying tonight are really, great, insightful comments. I really appreciate them. I think what we would like to try and get at this evening, and we'll do a round robin after this, is sort of go around to each of you and give a sense of, is this generally the right direction? And it, this is, you think it's great as is, or, and I know that most of you aren't in that category, but, is it really good? And you think there should be some tweaks to it, or, do you see major changes to it? And if so, what are those changes? And I think what we'd like to do is go round robin, and we've been doing some of that, but I think when everyone comes back together and all of the public, I think we'd like to go through and hear that. And again, I think we've heard some clear direction from you all so far. And I think probably a lot of potential agreement among you so far. So I think, again, so we can try and give the council some direction of where the GPAC is, with the overall direction of the GPAC and what you're thinking. We don't have to get everyone agreeing on everything, because there may be differences of opinion, but I think if we can try and get to that, that would be great.
Matt, before we do the round robin, Mark wanted to make a few comments also.
Okay, well, we're not going to do that until everyone comes back. And then Nick, before you go, I see you still have your hand up. Nick, so Rory, you wanted to speak, and then is there anyone else on the GPAC who hasn't had a chance to say anything who would like to say something? I think we'll do that first, and then go to the folks who have already said something. Okay, thanks for the thumbs up, Nick. Rory, go ahead.
Yes, I think I would join the groundswell in wishing the village centers could be incorporated. I think that's a really low tech and would be actually very welcome. I'm surprised that the surveys didn't support that. And also, I'm a little confused about Rancho Conejo. So is there no mixed use within the industrial park, only around the edges?
There is, that's a good question. And the problem is I'm trying to remember what the current land uses are, the proposed land uses. I know that, and Michael, maybe you can help me out with this. So I know that there are areas that are designated as commercial uses that we flipped over to mixed use. Michael, were there any blocks that are currently industrial that we flipped over to mixed use? And again, to also say that the mixed use would actually allow those jobs and office uses.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was letting everyone know 5 minutes. I'm sorry, which geographic area are we talking about?
In Rancho, were there any, sorry, I did that to you. You looked like you were paying attention, but you were looking at your screen. It's the problem with Zoom. Are there any parcels or blocks in Rancho Conejo that are currently designated as industrial employment that we're proposing as mixed use right now?
There are the two properties that face Lawrence Drive. I'm actually not positive. Mark probably knows. I don't know off the top of my head what the actual land use designation is, but I know that there are industrial uses and buildings on those properties. So those have a proposed mixed use medium designation. And not necessarily that we know that there are some successful businesses on those properties. So that's another situation, where we're not expecting that kind of change to happen overnight and are not advocating that those buildings be torn down or anything like that. It's just looking to the future and looking at that as a possible opportunity in the years to come. But I believe those are the only ones in Rancho Conejo. The other ones are currently commercial, have the commercial designation.
Marktown knows, guaranteed. Ask Mark.
Absolutely.
Should I raise my hand?
No. Please raise your hand so I can call on you to speak. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. First, I just wanted to say it's great to see everybody again, and I really respect the work that GPAC has done. It's been great. And as you know, I've rejoined the GPAC, the general plan update team. So be working on this for a little bit. Yeah, in the Rancho Conejo area, the two parcels on both sides of Lawrence, Michael is correct. Those are industrial today, proposed to be medium density mixed use as part of this preferred concept. And then the two lavender areas to the west of that are the existing commercial areas at I call it the Ross property on the east side and the Denny's property on the west side of Hillcrest there. So those are the existing and proposed land uses.
Thank you. Okay, let me stop sharing the screen here. I had that up so we could look at it. Rory, did you have any other questions?
No, that's it. I was just thinking there's so much actually open space within the industrial park in terms of, sweeping lawns, et cetera. It seems like that would be a place to tuck in some more housing.
Yeah, and that's always a a balance, because you want to also maintain the not infringe on the jobs and the employment that's there, and so that's certainly a delicate balance. Okay, are there any other members of the GPAC who haven't had a chance to speak yet before Nick goes again? He's been chomping at the bit. But anyone else? Dustin, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I had getting a lot of echo. You still here? I had a comment about mixed use, and it kind of relates to the village centers as well. Trying not to lose the retail that we do have, and understanding that might be going through a transition, but sometimes it comes back out through another transition. Once you build housing, that doesn't typically transition. You build apartments, they tend to stay there forever. You don't tend to demo those very often. And so I'm wondering with the village centers, whether some of the concern is that they would lose their commercial part. So like their Bonds or their Trader Joe's, if it were to allow for maybe more boutique retail and more residential. So I wonder if a policy that would allow residential if there was no reduction in the commercial use square footage, something like that, to ensure that the community is not losing those commercial uses that they rely on that are close to their homes.
Thank you. And I think those types of policies can be written in terms of the physical space, but they're a lot harder to implement in terms of market feasibility.
Yeah.
Right. And and making sure they're viable businesses. So that's the challenge that goes on with that one. Okay. Any other comments? Any other GPAC members who haven't spoken yet? All right, Nick. I don't see anyone else.
So I'll try to be fast since we're short on time. Based off the people I talked to, the two big wish list items among the younger millennials, the 20-somethings that I spoke to that are not reflected on the current plan were the walkable village centers like we're talking about before. Even if they don't necessarily have housing, just a more focus on walkability instead of seas of parking lots. And then number 2 was the revitalization and redevelopment at Jan's. They were really excited about the potential for more development, more housing there. So I'd like to voice support for what Darren was already saying, to get more flexibility at Jan's and possibly the Oaks, because all the folks I talked to were very excited about more stuff happening on those sites.
Okay. Michael, are folks coming back? Oh, they are back?
Everybody should be back, yes.
Okay. Great. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all have had great conversations and able to share ideas. I know the GPAC has shared a lot of great ideas, and it seems like there's some very common ideas among GPAC members in terms of improvements that could be made to the preferred alternative. We really appreciate all of the comments. What we'd like to do for the rest of the time, and we have half an hour, but if we need to, we maybe could go a little longer, but we want to respect everyone's time, is we'd like to just get brief feedback from the breakout groups to hear what each of the groups said, so that the GPAC can then have that in mind as they give some recommendations. Who wants to go first? Michael, do you want to tell me who you want to call on folks to give the report back?
Sure, let's start with Melissa's room.
Just getting my notes ready. All right, so Kristen and I had a great group conversation. Our group spent a lot of time thinking about big picture citywide. We did not get through all of the areas of change. I would say our group was pretty well split down the middle between those who were really supportive of actually more housing than what was presented in the preferred alternative, and the addition of housing in village centers, wanting taller buildings, more plazas, meeting space, affordable housing. And then folks on the other side of the spectrum that had concern over concentration of multifamily, wanting lower density, wanting to make sure there was concern for the environment, lower building heights, things of that nature. I think there was consensus from the group, and again, not that it was needed, that there was a desire to see, or an interest in, residential within village centers. Folks were very supportive of flexibility for retail areas like the Oaks Mall. Let's see. And I think those were the main highlights. Folks from our group are going to email comments because we did not get through all of the areas, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Melissa, Kristen, and everyone in that group.
Simran and Kari's room.
Right. So our group actually spent almost all of our time talking about the Rancho Conejo sub-area. There was some desire for the group to stay focused on the area that most of them were concerned with for the most part. And some said they didn't feel comfortable about offering comments about areas that they didn't know well or they didn't live in. Having said that, we had quite a few questions trying to understand what the reasons for the split designations on the Borchard or Alice property were, and there was, for the most part, a lot of support or desire to see a single mixed-use designation on that particular property. Someone offered the suggestion that maybe a specific plan or an overlay could get to the same goal as the split designation might, and that's something we can certainly discuss more. There were also several questions and comments about the need and the desire to see more affordable housing in the city, and some disappointment expressed that the village centers were now all commercial. The densities at the mall was lower than it could have been, and finally, that the Borchardt property is a vacant site with a lot of potential for housing, and could and should have higher density. Let's see. There was also some support for the vision that has been provided by the property owner for that specific property. Corey, do you want to add something to that?
I think you have, yeah, there was a lot of, I think you got it all. We didn't get to all of the different areas, but as Simran said, people were not comfortable reporting out on areas that they don't live in or are not familiar with. So there was a lot of focus on that area. There were a couple of comments about maybe reevaluating and bringing the village centers back into consideration.
Thank you.
And Tabitha and Ian.
Okay, so we didn't have a large group, but it allowed a lot of quality dialogue, and overall they both like the approach of basically, focusing on the areas of change and keeping the vast majority of the city, in its current configuration. There was some concerns just about the overall process and, the level of involvement, but the primary focus areas that they looked at, one person was in particular focused on the Rancho Conejo and the Newberry area, and also focused on the TOB. So we're able to cover the entire city. But basically, there was initial worry that the three alternatives were really kind of off base, but there was a general feeling that overall the preferred alternative was in a fairly good place, but there are caveats that both our participants had. So in regards to the Rancho Conejo area, they like the idea of mixed use north of the freeway, but they did not, or one in particular did not like it on the south side. And that was primarily due to not necessarily mixed use, but it was introducing height, tall buildings south of the highway in that area. Also, some of the other changes was the Seventh-day Adventist site, and questions as to why that arose to be industrial, and it should be a residential designation. And also they wanted to somehow provide an approach for better access, so there's less traffic in the area. Looking at the Moore Park Road and the West Thousand Oaks Boulevard area, and I'll just combine that with the downtown and Thousand Oaks Boulevard area, because the resounding comment that we received was that the entirety of the Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan should be treated equally. The participant was suggesting that it should all be mixed use medium, so that all property owners that have been part of that business improvement district and have been paying into that have an equal opportunity to develop their sites. And knowing that they all won't be developed, though, in the future. And that those property owners should have the same level of flexibility that sites such as the Jan's Mall and the Oaks Mall should have as well.
Hey, Ian, could you just one more minute so we can?
Yes, got it.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right. Generally, in terms of the Westlake and East End, they concur with that. The only thing I will wrap up with is the village centers. They did like the concept of the village centers. There wasn't really a specific discussion as far as introducing residential or mixed use. The one comment that we did say is that if we are going to add mixed use, that parking should be addressed adequately for the village centers. So that would wrap it up.
Great, thanks, Ian. Michael, there's only 3 groups, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. it sounds like the conversations in the groups actually were parallel in some ways to the conversations that the GPAC had in our group. So what I would like to propose that we do is for each GPAC member to speak in turn and spend, 30, well, let me just say, I'm hearing a lot of commonalities. I'm hearing that the village centers really need to come back. I'm hearing the desire for flexibility in some of the larger parcels, that's needed to allow flexibility, but also allow some sort of capping of development in those areas so that they're not overdeveloped. And that generally generally the preferred alternative is going in the right direction, but needs some tweaking in order to make it even better.
Matt, Mark wanted to make a few comments before we start the round robin.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody. Just a few comments based on some of the input, which, by the way, I really appreciate the thoughtful comments tonight. Very good discussion. There have been a few participants who have suggested flexibility at the Oaks Mall and Jan's Marketplace. And I just wanted to mention that those areas which are proposed for mixed use low do allow for horizontal mixed use. It doesn't have to be all vertical. You could have commercial on the front side next to Moore Park and have residential in the back, for instance. So the mixed use land use category in and of itself provides some flexibility. There's been some talk about the Borchard Road property and that quote unquote buffer between the existing neighborhood and the proposed mixed use. The existing neighborhood is low density. It's maximum 4.5 units. And the intervening buffer, so to speak, is 6 to 10 units. So it's a little bit more dense, not true single family detached as we traditionally know it. And then finally, just my last comment, I just want to emphasize that what we are talking about tonight is really important as we all recognize, but what it really is also is a preferred concept that if City Council endorses it, that basically they're saying that this will then go out for environmental analysis and then final review by the Planning Commission and City Council after the CEQA analysis. So while this is important, certainly there'll be a lot of analysis and some tweaking as we go forward. Just want to be sure that everybody was aware of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mark, for that context. All right, so if folks, again, I feel like there's some commonality that we're hearing. So if someone says something ahead of you and you agree with what they said, just kind of give that the thumbs up. And why don't we, is there anyone who wants to start? Again, what we want to try and do is get a sense of your individual direction and individual ideas that we can then sort of put together, and not only individual, but based on what you've heard for other people say and what you agree with. So is there anyone who wants to start start and go through what your thoughts are? And I would like everyone to speak here. So Fred, I'm going to have you go first. Again, try and keep it because we are 20 minutes or so from our supposed end time, but we can go over. So if everyone can try and keep it a little bit brief, that'd be great.
Thank you, Matt. You can hear me, correct? All right. Just to make it quick, I think the overall plan right now, the preferred plan, I think is reasonable. Since a lot of it goes through the Thousand Oaks Boulevard corridor, where you're not affecting most of the land in the city, and most of the areas that have already been discussed that are key, I think is fine. The big thing I wanted to say was that if you read the Acorn, you hear some people say we didn't know about it. Well, how come I didn't get access? I think the city has done an excellent job of putting the word out, and I just can't understand why some people would complain that they weren't informed. And the very fact that the public could participate at these meetings as well is a great thing, because we're affecting all these residents here. And so I think it's been a great process. Lastly, in clarification on that Orchard Road property adjacent to the 101, Mr. Meridian, I guess we didn't make the presentation tonight on behalf of himself. And this is very honestly, he is a lifelong resident of the city. And my impression was that he has the best interest of the city at heart, and as well as, owning that property, or his family owning that property. And one of the big things that I felt from him was that he wanted to make sure that the adjacent residents in that community there in Newbury Park were not negatively affected. That was a big concern of his, and the way he constructed his plan, it seemed to be, as I said before, a win-win for both the residents and the business and the community, and addressing traffic congestion and the enjoyment of the local residents in that mixed use environment there. So thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you, Fred. All right, Victor.
Thank you. I'm still a little cautious and hesitant to really, accept any of these with, I think the school impact is something that's important, significant, that really has to be looked at, because there are some trickle down effects that will affect those areas and schools that, belong and are in our city that exist in certain areas, especially on like one of the first maps that you showed on the presentation with, C and D areas on the Westlake side. That being said, I agree with what Andy Fox had said about the more of the density at and I think Darren had mentioned it also, with some flexibility at Jan's and the Oaks Mall. I am not for increasing densities from up to 45 per acre unless it's in those particular areas. And I think it was Jennifer who said that she's in favor of spreading out the density, and so am I. Thank you.
Thanks, Victor. Appreciate it. All right. Next, Chase.
Okay. So my thoughts were, like I said, about giving flexibility, and I go back to what was one of the speakers said that we had at the forum, Joe Minicozy. He talked a lot about parking lots and how there were some cities that had really strict parking requirements and sort of overbuilt parking. And I see places like the Oaks and the Jan's Marketplace, and they do have a lot of parking, and that they could conceivably in the future use some of those areas, convert them to housing, because as retail sort of the retail bubble burst, they're not going to have they may not have tenants to fill those spaces, and in turn that's going to equal less need for parking. So I think that would be I think that is something to keep in mind when you think about flexibility, is those places could put up housing if they took away some of the
Chase, overall, just one more quick question for you. Overall, is the alternative going in the right direction, but with some tweaks, or what's your sense? I'm going to put you on the spot. I apologize. You're muted. Chase, we can't hear you.
Okay.
There you go. Sorry.
Yeah, it needs it's going in the right direction, but it does need some small tweaks to increase flexibility.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, let's see, Darren.
Great, Matt. Thanks. I agree with Jason what you're saying. The general plan is definitely going in the right direction regarding land use. I think, as I mentioned, we just need to get the allowed uses and the mixed use to be combined, allow for hotel, And then at the Oaks and Jans, which I had mentioned, I think we need a little more flexibility on height and density, but in certain limits, in certain areas of those properties, because they're so large. I think they can be limited, but allow for some uses and some more flexibility given the changing retail character and the different configurations of those centers. But in general, definitely going in the right direction. I agree with Andy related to the mixed use designations on Westlake at the Caruso property and across the street. Those properties are going to be the same. So maybe we could move some of that mixed use to the other areas, as I mentioned. And that's it for me. Good job, guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Darren. All right. Next, Karen.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Okay. And I would just like to agree, I think this is moving in the right direction. And what I have gained so far from our meetings is that the general plan is not really about buildings or land, it's about people. It's about people. And so we're operating under the assumption that all these new proposed developments are going to enhance the livability of Thousand Oaks and be an even better place to live and work and raise a family and grow old and age in place, as many of us want to do. But at some point moving forward, I think we need to make those connections very specific for people. For instance, as someone who is aging, I think a village center would be a delightful place to live. But let's make some of those connections more explicit, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Laura, you're next.
Thanks. First, I want to thank the staff and consultants. I think you guys have really done a yeoman's job in putting all of this together and taking such care to outreach and hear from as much of the community as possible. So I really do appreciate the efforts, and I think you've put together something for us all to consider. And generally, I am supportive of the preferred alternative. I join my fellow committee members in saying there should be some tweaks made to the plan in order to address the concerns and comments that have been raised tonight. Particularly for me, the village centers, I think, are an important component. It seems that a lot of the comments this evening do support a relook at that. Perhaps they are not appropriate in all of the sites that have been under consideration, but I really would like to see those reconsidered, and would also like to see the comments about maximizing flexibility incorporated and addressed in the plan. One thing I would like to also note is I'm not particularly comfortable increasing height or density over what's been proposed in this preferred alternative. But other than that, again, I think you've done an excellent job, and I think we are really moving forward to something that the community can be proud of and have as a balanced approach that preserves what this community has built over the course of its history while looking forward for future generations.
Thank you, Laura. Jennifer.
I'll be quick. You heard from me before. Like Laura, I feel I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the Herculean efforts of the staff and consultant in integrating and synthesizing all of this input over these many, many months, years at this point. So thank you all for all of the guidance and facilitation. I also feel like the alternative is by and large in the correct direction. Yeah, you all know that I certainly would like the mixed use of the village centers to be incorporated and considered. And I hear what a lot of my fellow committee members are saying about making sure there's sufficient flexibility for the Oaks and Jans in particular. And if we're going to have additional density, that's probably the place to do it. Sort of a town center idea there would be interesting.
Thanks, Jennifer. see, Mick.
Thanks. Again, I may come with a slightly counter view of some of this. I do think there's really a lot of really interesting and very forward-looking things in here. So I definitely think there are phenomenal resources for us to think about how the city can develop. I do have caution about the scope and the size of the proposed changes. I think they're out of historical character with the city as it has come to date. There are needs for change. There are things that we have to do to meet with state law, and there are economic changes that I think that we have to address and should look at. One, I think if we were to prioritize, I'm in favor of changes at the Oaks and Jan's Marketplace. I think that the economics of shopping malls with Amazon delivering to the home and movie theaters with broadband and quality delivery to the home, I think change the economics of that. COVID has accelerated that. And I think that we could be in a position of being reactive if we don't think proactively about those areas of change. I also think that Thousand Oaks being a global biotech hub, there's a window of opportunity to support the Rancho Cordero area north of the 101 to make sure that we can support that from an economic viability point of view. Historically, and I still would argue moving forward, the residents of Thousand Oaks have wanted buildings to be low in profile because they did not want the cityscape dominated by buildings. They wanted the majestic and pristine hillsides to be what dominate our cityscape. And that's a result of forward-looking development policies that's been put together by our general plan and the city leaders, past and present, and the public. I'd want to make sure that we continue to honor that going forward.
Thanks, Mick. Appreciate it. From Mick to Nick.
I've talked plenty, but I'll say looks like it's going in the right direction. Supportive of the looking at the malls again and town center stuff. The main feedback I hear over and over: walkable, bikeable, accessible by transit. Just having destinations that are not dominated by cars is all I keep hearing about when I go talk to people. So, but overall, right direction.
Great, thank you. Andy.
Thanks, Matt. So just briefly, I want to piggyback. Mick brought up a couple of points with respect to size and scope, and I think that complements what I was commenting on earlier. There's you know, I don't know about thousands, but there's many parcels that are identified in this plan that already have buildings on them, and they're well-established businesses. I use the Promenade as a classic example. That's been designated for several hundred homes. I would recommend scrap that. There's no reason to have those artificial numbers, which is giving the sense of a much broader size and scope than what's really going on. And so I think the most transparent and honest way to do that is parcels that everybody knows are not going to be developed in the next 20, 30 years need to be scrapped of really artificial units that have been assigned to them. In areas where we think there is housing, like that Westlake area, look for parcels that are underutilized or vacant and do a reasonable amount of housing in that area. So that would be my first comment. The second thing is, I do think that this process has done and adhered to the principles that Mick was talking about. It does maintain all the existing neighborhoods without impact. It does maintain and protect the hillsides, the open space, the view sheds. It does those things. It does kind of focus on the job sectors and the economy of it. So I think the big 30,000 foot view, it's done a good job, but I think there is room for tweaks. And some of them I've commented on. I do think along the Thousand Oaks, the 101 388 corridor, there ought to be in this plan as much flexibility with reason. You know, nobody's interested in buildings that are 100 feet high, to give the council an opportunity to actually surgically put in some mixed use where it makes sense. It clearly, as others have said, it needs to be looked at the Oaks Mall and the Jan's Mall, along the boulevard in certain places, and then out on the Borchard property. And again, I'm going to just throw out for consideration on some of these larger parcels that are 20, 30, 40 acres, be open to a different general plan designation. If you're concerned about, with the SB 335, maybe think about a general plan designation of 10 units per acre of every parcel over, I don't know, 20 acres. So it really lowers these large numbers that people are concerned about, but it also gives the property owner the flexibility to do some interesting things. And that's exactly what would happen at Borchard Road. Again, I'm going to say it again. I understand the need for the low density, but if you talk to those folks and ask them that are already living there, do you want a house just like yours directly behind you, or would you like a buffer and green belt? I can guarantee what their answer is going to be. And the only way to get that is to give these property owners the flexibility to move the density around and do some interesting things on these larger parcels. So, and again, I'm going to say those opportunity sites that the council talked about need to be focused on. They've been studied. They are primed for this type of use, and those should be the first tier, if you will, of what we look at in terms of community benefit and areas of interest. So those are my thoughts.
Great, thank you. All right, if you are a GPAC member and you have not spoken yet, can you please raise your hand? Okay. See, Rory.
Yes, thank you, Matt, and really, really good job. I'm generally supportive of this preferred alternative, and my fellow committee members have all pointed out the need for flexibility and some tweaks, like with the two big shopping centers. And of course, I'm really hoping we can revisit the idea of including the village centers.
Thank you, Rory. Jacqueline.
Yeah, so I think the overall plan has been developed extremely well. I piggyback off of what many other members have said about, especially as a youth, I think the need for a walkable village center is something that's extremely important, especially to people of my age group. But I think overall, everyone has done a great job with developing this plan and the alternative.
Thank you. Thanks, Jacqueline. Okay, can the team help me out? Who are any GPAC members who haven't spoken, who are on? Or do we have everyone covered? Michael? Okay.
I'm looking at the list and I think we have everyone covered.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for volunteering before you were voluntold. So we're at 8:30, and I'd like to just see. I want to respect everyone's time this evening, but if there's anyone from the public who wants to just say something to the group, maybe in 20 seconds or so, 30 seconds, because it's a public meeting, we don't have official, it's not official public comment period. But if anyone does want to kind of share a thought, and please try and keep it really short since it is late, that would be great. Let's see, and I will, if you go on too long, I may.
Thomas White, please.
So yes, okay, Thomas, why don't you go first? We have a few others, but go ahead since you chimed in. Thomas, do you want to? Yeah. Okay.
Thomas is muted. Okay, there you go.
I'm good now. I want to thank Melissa and Kristen for their help, but they said if you have all these comments you can't all get in time, to please email to gp@toaks.org. I thought that was really helpful. I probably got 3 pages of comments that I'll get in. Thank you very much. It was a very good meeting. I'll go back to being muted now.
Thank you for the comments. Let's see, Tim.
Hey, thank you very much. I'm so excited about this Borchard Road project. I can't even tell you. I'm a resident of Newberry Park. I've been here for 20 years. And to have a place where we could have community, to be able to have something to showcase the great opportunities that we have on the other side of the freeway, in a place where everyone can gather, I think that's what they want. I also know the residents in that neighborhood. I'm very close to them, and they don't want something right up against them. They want a buffer. They want something. So I'm asking the committee to recommend a mixed use plan. Thank you. Have a great evening. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Tim. Sean.
Good evening, Matt and GPAC committee members. Sean Maradian, lifelong resident of Thousand Oaks, homegrown, and it's a pleasure to be here before you. There's a lot of discussion this evening about the opportunity site in the Rancho Cordero area that my family has owned for 43 years, and we have considered this every single year for the last 43 years, and to create a place where the entire area around Newbury Park could be proud of. That part of town does not have any place for gathering. It doesn't have any of the amenities that we have been talking about this evening. So we put forward a plan, and I had the opportunity to share with a few people, and I would love to share with anybody else. I don't know if anybody can see this, but this is the concept we put forward. And if you can see the areas in the green, that is that beautiful area of open space and a ring and a buffer that everyone's talking about, filled in with other type of incredible amenities like a beer garden and a lake and trails and open space and a place where people can gather and walk with their kids and walk their dogs. And it has some hospitality in it. And it checks not just one of the boxes, but I believe several of the boxes. We're very excited about it, but in order to do something like that, we really, really encourage and support the notion that we can have some flexibility on the site. As you heard from a lot of the other GPAC members, it's really not about density for us, but in order to create a real immersive sense of place, we do need a little bit of flexibility. And I love, as this process goes forward, to be able to share this concept with my fellow residents more. But for now, thank you for the support and thank you for letting me speak.
Thanks, Sean. Kinsey, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I am a resident of Newbury Park. I actually am one of the 3 homes on Michael Drive that own directly back up into the fence through the wash. So I was very curious about this project. I own Moms of Conejo Valley as well. And I know that there are so many young families here that are looking for something to do, looking for a place to go. Newbury Park doesn't have a downtown. And the thought of having that directly behind my house within walking distance sounds incredible. So I think that this will really help our community to come together. And I really feel like the people that are in this meeting, we all need to be the messengers of truth instead of spreading false information and making sure that that false information is replaced with true information, because I know in my own community, I've had people walking around giving false information. So I just really encourage everyone in this meeting to share the true information and get the word out about this so as many people can weigh in our community as possible.
Thank you, Kinsey. Danielle.
Good evening, GPAC. Danielle Borgia, President CEO of the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber, also a lifelong resident of Thousand Oaks. Just want to comment that I appreciate a lot of the discussion tonight from the GPAC around providing some more flexibility to a lot of our property owners. We would love to, as a chamber, see some more medium density built into this plan, and also even the consideration of some of the high density coming back in the appropriate areas. And also Andy Fox's comments about really looking at sites that have feasibility for being developed within this timeline that we're looking at of the next 25 years. So really appreciate all the dialogue tonight, and appreciate you considering the recommendations.
Thank you, Danielle. All right, we have 3 more folks, and then I think we're gonna end after that. Wendy, and then Andrew, and then John.
I would like to remind the committee that at the special meeting of the Casa Conejo MAC, which some of you attended, the neighborhood of Casa Conejo is largely opposed to major development going into the Alice property, contrary to what some folks think. I'd like to encourage you to refresh your minds about that. We do have flood control issues related to that property with the high water table, and we also have a lot of waterfowl in that area. So we would like to see something much, much softer be there. And not that we do also have spaces with the shopping centers and Orchard on the other side of Orchard that are much more amenable to putting in entertainment, including the shopping and some of the things that are envisioned for those properties if some of those things are readapted. Plus, there's a lot of Newbury Road that can be utilized in that same way.
Great, thank you for your comments, Wendy. Appreciate it. Let's see, then there is John.
Hi.
And then Andrew.
Hey, I'm John Edney. I was born and raised here in Thousand Oaks. I'm one of the owners of Tarantula Hill and chief operating officer there. I kind of just wanted to echo some of the stuff that Fred had said earlier about the Newbury Park, Sean Rodian's project. I think I'm one of the people that he showed his ideas to, and you know what Fred had said earlier. You know, he is a lifelong resident. He does care about this community. You know, it's interesting hearing everybody talking tonight about all the concerns with whatever, and he's really taking into consideration all that stuff. I think is awesome. And then also as well, we've been during the process of our project, we've been trying to find a way to maybe open some kind of a tap room to something that would be closer to the people from Amgen. And this would be a great opportunity for us to get something over there. It's obviously super close to our location, but it seems like it might make a lot of sense to do that because of the this opportunity. Yeah, that was it.
Thank you. Let's see, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Matt, for the opportunity to speak and to the fellow committee members. I mainly wanted just to echo some of the points that have been made. I believe Andy Fox raised some great points, and I would share those in the map considerations, specifically with the Newbury Park property, Sean Maradian's property. I'm encouraged looking at his just map that he held up to the group to see a green belt there. I think if many of the concerns raised about flood and water, I think can naturally be addressed from a planning perspective by turning it into a green belt area versus that kind of split zoning that's on the property now. I think maximizing the flexibility of the unit, the possibility moving it all to the mixed use, I think is the right move. Finally, just one other quick point. I just wanted to encourage, as you take a look at the map, to look at the Jan's Marketplace in Thousand Oaks Mall, possibly look at an increase in density there to a medium mixed use. I think that's, again, I've advocated for, this is the most logical place to put mixed use in the city because of the setbacks, parking, traffic, and access to the 101. All those kind of boxes that you check when you hit the Planning Commission and go through this process can be met with that, but giving those property owners maximum flexibility is key. So thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much. And then last is Adam, and then we're going to close the meeting.
Thank you. Adam Haverstock. I'm the Director of Government Affairs and Tourism for the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to comment really quickly. We obviously did some outreach around the survey that was recently run, and the results, obviously came in and said that land use map 1 was the preferred choice. And we supported that map, and we encouraged people to support map 1. And the reason was because it had the mixed use medium and mixed use high land use designations used throughout the city. Yet, I read in the memo that the basis for this new map was alternative map 1, but it removed the things that we liked about alternative map 1 from the map, which was the mixed use high and the mixed use medium used throughout the city. So I would encourage this committee and staff to consider adding some of that density back in. The city of Thousand Oaks did say that diversity and inclusion is their #1 goal, and that they want to see more affordable housing within the city. Well, in order for a developer to make a profit, they have to have enough density to build the houses they were going to build anyway, and the additional affordable units on top of that. So if we want to see these projects be a success, and I'll also say we should focus on those opportunity sites that Andy Fox mentioned as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. All right, apologies to everyone. We are a little bit over. We know this is an incredibly important topic. Just a couple of closing comments here before we depart for the evening. A reminder to everyone that we do have a survey available. There's approximately 15 questions trying to understand a little bit more detail about the preferred alternative and preferred direction. The survey closes May 12th, so please encourage all of your friends to take the survey. The next is that there are a series of upcoming events just to let you know about. On next week, on the 26th, is the Planning Commission meeting to talk about the preferred alternative. We got great comments tonight that we're going to put together and package so that we can do our best to represent what you all said in the direction from this evening. And then from there will be a city council meeting or meetings May 18th and then May 25th. And just to echo what Mark had said, we are trying to get to the preferred land use plan at the end of May, beginning of June. This is really to move the housing element forward, and we know that based on this, there may be some tweaks moving forward after this. We are trying to get as close as we can to the preferred direction at this time. The other comment I want to make is that the land use plan is not the entire plan, and that a lot of the things that Karen brought up in terms of green space and quality of life need to be part of the plan as well. And it is very difficult to talk about a topic like this that people are so passionate about and all the other topics at the same time. So we try to do them somewhat sequentially, but clearly when we do that, we miss the big picture sometimes. And as Karen very astutely pointed out. And so we do have 6 months after this of talking and preparing some of the other topics about sustainability and open space and parks and public services and schools, right? So there will, and transportation. So there are going to be a lot of additional conversations after this. I want to close this evening just with a big thank you to everyone. In this environment that we are in now, that sometimes conversations can get contentious, and I really appreciate the respect that you all have for each other, and recognizing that there are differences of opinion, and being able to have a discourse and a dialogue around those differences is really special. And as someone who is working all across the state, this is rare, this is unique, and you really have something special in the community itself, in the physical form, as well as who you are as people and how you treat each other. And again, I just want to kind of thank you all. Thank you all for doing this. So I think we are at the close of our time this evening. We are gonna need to end here. I'd like to again thank everyone, encourage people to come to the Planning Commission meeting and to the City Council meeting, and again, keep the dialogue going with this. We hear that there's a good direction, but we also hear that there are certainly some tweaks that need to happen, this preferred plan. So with that, I wanted to thank everyone and just say good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy, spread.